And the Greens leader Adam Bandt is still holding that news conference. He's now answering questions. Let's listen in.
Voices heard in a peaceful manner, calling for an end to the slaughter and the invasion of Gaza. And those protests that have gone on for months and months and months have been overwhelmingly peaceful. Where there have been incidents that you have referred to, Greens MPs haven't been involved in that. Greens MPs haven't been involved in that. Greens MPs have not been involved in that. And now the Prime Minister yesterday sought to, as part of a massive distraction from the government's support for the invasion of Gaza, sought to tie a whole bunch of issues together as a massive distraction. Now, the Greens have been crystal clear. We are a party of peace and non-violence. We support protest that is peaceful.
You said the support for ongoing invasion and slaughter. You've accused the government of supporting slaughter.
From day one, it was clear that an invasion of Gaza, an area half the size of Canberra, with 2.2 million people in it, 40% of whom are under the age of 15, would lead to a humanitarian catastrophe. And from day one, the Greens said that the invasion of Gaza must not proceed. But the government backed it. The government backed the invasion of Gaza and continued to do so. And time after time, we have come back to this place asking the government, asking Labor to take some action to put pressure on this extreme Israeli government that is subject to orders to stop genocide to act. There are things the government could do right now. Labor could stop the two-way arms trade with Israel, but it continues it. In fact, it awards new contracts at the time that this invasion is occurring. The government has a responsibility under international law when international courts step in and say there is a plausible case of genocide. It is up to governments like Labor to then step up and act and say we will do things to put pressure to bear to stop a war crime happening, and Labor has not done that. Labor has continued to give its backing to this invasion day after day. Other countries around the world last week moved to recognise Palestine, understanding that that was a very practical step that would help bring some pressure to bear to stop this slaughter, and Labor refused to do that as well. All Labor has offered is hand-wringing tweets and statements that the extreme war cabinet of Benjamin Netanyahu just ignores. But you have to take some action to bring pressure to bear.
Mr. Bandt, you have expressed solidarity. You have expressed solidarity.
So you're denying that?
So
are you denying that Labor has actually called for a ceasefire in denial?
Labor has been refusing to call for a permanent ceasefire.
They've called repeatedly for a ceasefire. They've voted for a ceasefire.
I'm really happy to finish the sentence. Labor has refused repeatedly to call for a permanent ceasefire. What they've called for is a humanitarian ceasefire so that there's a pause so that people can be fed and then the bombing can start again. And Labor has refused to actually do anything that would make a ceasefire more likely, and that is our point. That is our point.
They want a ceasefire so that the bombing can resume again. When has the government said that?
Repeatedly, Labor has said that their words are to call for a humanitarian ceasefire, a pause. A pause. You go back and you have a look at the exact words that they've used. That's what they've been calling for.
Mr. Bandt, you have expressed solidarity with the pro-Palestinian protesters at electorate offices. You say they have been courageous. Will you condemn them today and will you ask them to stop the blockading so that members of the community can access these offices?
Well, let's be clear. I've seen conflicting reports already this morning about what is happening at the Prime Minister's electorate office. There's a report today that suggests that what we were told yesterday is not in fact the case. Right? There's a report in the Fairfax Press that suggests the facts might actually be different. So I think we need some clarity about what is in fact happening there. We have been crystal clear. I was reported last week as saying this. We've been crystal clear that as a party of peace and non-violence, protest must be peaceful with respect to people and property. Last week, I made clear that we backed the organisers' calls that there should not be vandalism or similar. We have been crystal clear on that. And I think that, had the government been engaging in Parliament like yesterday in good faith, they would have known that. They would have known that we have made that crystal clear. What we are expressing support for is peaceful protest across the country, calling for the government to do something to bring pressure to bear on this extreme Israeli war cabinet, because the slaughter is getting worse. Children are dying because they can't get enough to eat or drink. And at the moment, I know the Prime Minister is desperate to make it about anything other than the children who are dying in Gaza and the people who are being slaughtered. The Prime Minister is desperate to distract from the ongoing invasion, the massive human suffering that we are witnessing before our eyes, and instead to make it about something else. Well, it's because people have been bringing pressure to bear and want the government to join the global calls for peace that we're seeing the distraction strategy this week.
Do you condemn the actions, though, of some of the protesters at the event that Jet Carney was holding? She wrote a letter to you explaining women were injured there. There were members of the Greens Party there. Do you condemn what occurred at that event?
Well, again, there's a conflation of a lot of things happening there. There was, as I understand, I wasn't there, so I'm going from what Ms Carney has told me, there was a peaceful rally at the front of an event where people spoke, and Ms Carney said she had no problem with that, at all. After that, according to her, there were some people who then came through into the theatre where those events that you referred to were happening. And she didn't allege that Greens people were involved in that. No, but Greens and everyone deserves a safe workplace. Of course, everyone deserves a safe workplace. There is no place for violence in this country. And we have made that crystal clear. There is no place for violence in politics. There is no place for violence in this country. Everyone deserves a safe workplace. But again, I make the point. No one is actually suggesting the Greens were involved in that. The government, in a desperate attempt to distraction, is trying to distract from their own position, is trying to roll all of these things together. Greens MPs were not involved in that.
The opposition leader's just spoken on, Mr. Bant, the opposition leader's just spoken on 2GB. He's called the Greens Party evil. He says you're unfit for office. What do you make of those remarks?
I will not be lectured to about peace and non-violence from a Prime Minister and opposition leader who back the invasion of Gaza and continue to do so right up to this day, even as we see the tragic suffering unfolding before our eyes. Thanks very much.